Good evening, and welcome to this week's edition of The Message. I am your host, Donatus King. We'll spend this next hour with one purpose in mind, and that one purpose is to deliver the message that God is Almighty. Everything that ever was, is now, or ever will be, is a piece of God. Everything that ever was, is now, or ever will be, was made by God. Everything that ever happened, is happening right now, or ever will happen, was made to happen by God. God is the master plan for all time and all creation. God is Almighty. The message is brought to you by, is produced by the Society of Knowledge. The Society is an interdenominational ministry. Our members come from various different religious and spiritual backgrounds. We have various different religious and spiritual beliefs. Although we come from different backgrounds and have different beliefs, there's one belief that we share in common. There's one piece of knowledge that we share. And that's the knowledge that there is a being, by no matter what name we may have been taught to call that being, by no matter what name we may have come to know that being, whether that name be God, Allah, Yahweh, Jesus, Jehovah, Buddha, by no matter what name, we know that there is a being that possess not some of the power, not most of the power, but all of the power. We know that there is indeed an almighty being. That's the reason we do this show, and the only reason we do the show, and that's to deliver the message that that being that personally I call God, that being is indeed almighty. Today is August the 12th, 2021. And I remind that fact because tonight, as we are on most Thursdays, we are live. And I remind that fact because this show is an open discussion. It's a two-way conversation. For those of you that are watching on Facebook, I invite you to join the discussion, join the conversation by posting your comments, and I'll do my best to read them out over the air. I also invite you to join the conversation by joining us on Zoom. If you look on this Facebook page, an earlier post, you'll see it says Zoom invitation. Open up that post, and there's a link that you can click on, and it'll take you to the Zoom meeting. So again, join the discussion. And it's important that you join the discussion if there's something that's going on in your church, your mosque, your masjid, your place of worship, your synagogue, your temple, whatever name you call it. If there's something that's going on in your place of worship and you want to share that information with the world, share it. Share it by posting your comments on Facebook or joining us on Zoom and sharing it through Zoom. If there's something that's going on in your nonprofit organization and you want to share that information with the world, do the same thing. Post it on Facebook or join us and share it with Zoom. More important than what's going on in your nonprofit organization, more important than what's going on in your place of worship, at least in my opinion, more important. If there's something that God has done for you in your life, a miracle that God has worked in your life. And I use that word literally, a miracle, because the God that I'm here to tell you about is working miracles. That's right. In the year 2021, on August the 12th, 2021, the God that I'm here to tell you about is working miracles. So if God has worked a miracle in your life, share your testimony, post it on Facebook, join us on Zoom, and share your testimony. All right, we have a packed show tonight, and so we're going to get right at it. And let's go to our screens here, and we have some slides that we're going to go through. All right, and let's say today is August the 12th. We'll have our announcements. Then after our announcements, we'll have a testimony After our testimonies, we will have a religious spiritual study, prove all things, hold fast that which is good, coming out of the first book, Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 21. Our discussion topic tonight is the Quakers. Now, we were supposed to start that discussion last Thursday, but we didn't. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more coming up shortly. And, you know, it feels good to be back live. We were not live last week, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. And as you see depicted on the screen now, an artist rendering of a Quaker gathering. Our words of inspiration will come out of the book of Exodus, beginning in chapter 10, verse 24 to 29, and we'll see how far we get. We will then go into chapter 11, starting with verse 1. What you see on the screen right now, that's our main website, and that's www.godisalmighty.org. I invite you, I encourage you to lock that website into your web browser, and 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can visit that website, and there are links to all of our social media outlets. We have a religious blog. We have a Facebook page, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, all of our social media platforms. You don't have to worry about writing all those names down. Just go to our main website. Just write that down. And that's easy to remember, godisalmighty.org. Godisalmighty.org. Go to that main website, and there are links to all of our social media platforms. The message tonight is coming out of New Orleans, Louisiana, but on the first and third Sundays at 9 p.m., the message is delivered by Messenger Ryan King and Messenger Corey Levier on Facebook Live at the Messenger Facebook page. And that show is produced by Lafayette, Louisiana Center of the Society of Knowledge. The Lafayette, Louisiana Center of the Society of Knowledge, that's presided over by Messenger Ryan King. The Opelousas Center is presided over by Messenger Corey Levier. And the Central Florida Center of the Society is presided over by Messenger Tainav L. Tonight's program is dedicated to in memoriam of Morris Sonny Price III, my brother-in-law, Morris Sonny Price III. And you see on your screen now, COVID-19, please get vaccinated. Now, I said a minute ago that I would discuss why we were not live last week. And we were not live last week because we were celebrating the homegoing of my brother-in-law, Sonny. And after you saw the picture of Sonny on the screen just now, you saw my plea for you to please get vaccinated. And I put one behind the other like that on the program for a reason. As I said, we were celebrating the homegoing of Sonny last week at this hour of the day. And those of you that are from the New Orleans area, you know that oftentimes we will have a homegoing service. Some folks might call it a funeral service. And that will occur usually in the early afternoon or the late morning. And then after that, that's followed by what's called a repast. And the repast is a time when folks leave the church or the gathering point wherever the religious service was held. And they come together and they eat, they drink, they fellowship. And the whole family is together. Oh, the grandparents, parents, children, cousins, aunts, nieces, nephews, the whole family comes together. And we actually celebrate. We celebrate the life of the deceased. Now, for the past year, there are, for a while, all throughout the United States, including Louisiana, folks had stopped having large gatherings for funerals. And I attended several funerals virtually, where you'd have a few family members in the chapel, and it would be streamed live over the internet. And the reason that was done was because of COVID. And folks were not gathering together in large groups because of COVID. But about 2 months ago, folks all over the United States started relaxing, started feeling comfortable, feeling that the worst was over with COVID. Stores started reopening. Bars started reopening. Nightclubs started reopening. Gyms, all different kind of stuff that had shut down started reopening. And one of the things that started reopening was funerals. And folks started having funerals again. Folks would pack the church, and then folks would have repasts. And that's what happened to us last Thursday. We became very relaxed. And I'm taking this time, and I'm going slow. I'm going slow for a couple of reasons. Number one is I want what I'm saying to sink in. I want you to really hear and understand what I'm saying. And another reason that I'm going kind of slow is because I'm trying to catch my breath. Understand what I'm saying? We let our guard down. We were at the repast. It had to have been at least 30 or 40 of us, maybe more than that. And we're all celebrating, eating and drinking, talking, celebrating. That was last Thursday. Then comes Saturday. We start getting phone calls and reports about family members that were being tested for COVID and testing positive. And then the reports and the phone calls started becoming more frequent And at my last count, there were 14 family members that have tested positive since the repast. And I'm one of them. I am blessed, grateful, thankful. I thank God that I had my vaccinations. And even though I still tested positive, even though I still have the COVID, I know that my symptoms are much less than they would be had I not been vaccinated. And you know, for this past year, I've been reluctant, even though I got my vaccination back in March, I think, fully vaccinated, 2 shots. But I've been reluctant to advocate, to publicly advocate for the vaccination. And I've been reluctant because I felt that I didn't want to try to persuade anybody to get vaccinated or not get vaccinated. That should be their own decision. I didn't want to try to influence anybody. But I'm sharing this with you, and I am indeed imploring you, asking you to please, if you have not been vaccinated, please go get your vaccination. And I've heard all the different reasons why folks don't want to get vaccinated. I've heard them. Now I understand. But as someone that's living with the disease, someone that's knowing that because I have the disease, I can pass it on to someone else that maybe have not been vaccinated, maybe that has underlying conditions, and that someone else contracts it and dies. It's not over with. And the things that you hear on TV about how hospitals are becoming full all over the United States, that's no exaggeration. I'm living proof that this resurgence is real. I sit here this evening testifying that yes, it's real. It's not over with. It hasn't gone away. It's as dangerous now as it's ever been. Whatever you do, not only do it for yourself, but do it for those that are around you. Go get your vaccination. Make sure your family members are vaccinated. Now, I'm not encouraging you to get in a fight with any of your family members, to try to force them to get vaccinated, but encourage them. Encourage them. This is real. Nothing to play with. This is real. All right. I thank my wife for joining us on Facebook. And I've been blessed. And I would just share with you that my wife has tested negative, but I have 3 of my children that have tested positive, 2 grandchildren that have tested positive, other family members that have tested positive. And as I said, the last count was 14. This is something, if you haven't been vaccinated, go tomorrow and get vaccinated. All right, let's move on. Let's move on with the show. COVID-19, please, please get vaccinated. Imani Temple number 49 of the African American Catholic Congregation, presided over by Bishop John W. Milton. That's in 201 East Willow Street in Lafayette, Louisiana. Imani Temple number 28, presided over by Bishop Wendy Mee. And that's located at 2411 Treasure Street here in the city of New Orleans. Previously recorded episodes of The Message can be watched on television, Cox Cable Orleans, Channel 76. It airs on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. and Thursdays at 7:30 p.m. Central Time. And you can also always watch previously recorded episodes of The Message on our YouTube page. And that's YouTube. And the channel is DNK Messenger. Testimonies, I think we do have a testimony tonight. All right. That's testimony coming out of North Carolina. The sister testifying that indeed God is almighty. So folks all around the world are testifying that God is almighty. And when we look through our Bible, look through our Quran, look through all of our religious works, you'll see that same message that God is almighty, that testimony that God is almighty. But tonight, our discussion tonight is the Quakers. Okay, the Quakers. And this same picture that we looked at earlier, and that's an artist rendering of a Quaker meeting. Now, the official name of the religion, the organization, is the Religious Society of Friends. Okay, so that's the real name of the Quakers. The Religious Society of Friends are a movement within Christianity that began in 1650s England. The early Quaker co-founders were George Fox and Margaret Fell. Now, a number of folks didn't realize that one of the co-founders of the Quakers was a female, Margaret Fell, and there you see a picture of her. And, oh, look at that. That looks like the Quaker man, huh? If you ever had oatmeal, Quaker oats, that looks just like the oatmeal man. And that was actually George Fell. And isn't that something? The Quaker man and Quaker oatmeal? Isn't that something? A coincidence, huh? All right. The Religious Society of Friends. And what you see on the screen, again, is an artist's rendering of a meeting of the Quakers, the Religious Society of Friends. The early Quakers were unhappy with institutionalized Christianity, which they saw as having lost its way by becoming too embodied in the state. Quakers sought to revive primitive Christianity by going back to the roots of Christianity in Jesus' teachings around nonviolence, simple living, God's concern for the marginalized, the immediate and equal access to God's Spirit. Some of the practices that made early Quakers stand out was their refusal, and there again, George Fox, one of the founders of the Quakers. Again, Margaret Fell. And one of their, some of the practices that made early Friends, early Quakers stand out was their refusal to pay tithes, which were a required religious tax. So when we go in some of our Christian churches nowadays, and we'll hear the preacher preach a sermon about giving God his share, encouraging folks to pay tithes. Well, that was one of the things that the Quakers rebelled against. The Quakers said, no, you're doing like the scribes and the Pharisees, those money changers in the temple that Jesus complained about and overthrew their table. And because of that, one aspect of the Quaker teachings is the refusal to pay tithes. They also refused to take oaths by swearing on the Bible, saying that doing so created a double standard for truth. Instead, Christians should let their yes be yes and no be no. And there are some folks today that will not take an oath by swearing on the Bible. And in court now, where you used to have to swear when you were getting ready to testify, now they allow you to affirm instead of swearing, that you can, in the alternative, just affirm. Okay? Instead of swearing that you're going to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, you can affirm. So a number of folks have been concerned by swearing an oath on the Bible. Early Quaker worship was marked by an expectant silence, where there was an expectation that Christ, who was present among them, would lead individuals to share messages out of the silence. This allowed them to practice the priesthood of all believers in a way that clergy-led churches were never able to do. Friends, and by friends, that's the Quakers, gathered together in expectant waiting upon God to experience his still small voice leading them from within. There is no plan on how the meeting will proceed, and practice varies widely between meetings and individual worship services. Friends believe that God plans what will happen, with the Spirit leading people to speak. A participant who feels led to speak will stand and share a spoken message. That's called a vocal ministry in front of others. When this happens, Quakers believe that the Spirit of God is speaking through the speaker. After someone has spoken, it is customary to allow a few minutes to pass in silence for reflection on what was said before further vocal ministry is given. Sometimes a meeting is quiet silence. Sometimes many speak. And I've read about meetings where no one ever speaks. And then it just gets to a point where they decide that the service, the meeting is over. Friends opted to not take physical sacraments, abolishing the final two the Protestants hung on to, in favor of an inward communion and baptism. So those sacraments of communion and baptism, the Quakers do not do that. Moving from external to internal markers meant that Friends placed high priority on behavior and what became known as testimony. That is the public witness of God lived out in one's life. So no communion, no baptism. Quakers were also prominently involved with the Underground Railroad. The Quaker campaign to end slavery can be traced back to the late 1600s, and many played a pivotal role in the Underground Railroad. In 1776, Quakers were prohibited from owning slaves, and 14 years later, they petitioned the U.S. Congress for the abolition of slavery. That's a little bit, just a little bit information about the Quakers. So, as you saw earlier, the picture of the Quaker oatmeal man, and those of you, that were born and raised in the 50s, 60s, and maybe even 70s, you saw that face all the time because our parents had that little round box in the cabinet with those Quaker oats in it, and that fellow's face smiling from the box with that funny looking hat. So now we've learned a little bit more about the Quakers. And as we read, and much of what I read just now, that came off the internet, off of Wikipedia. And as I say, Thessalonians tells us, chapter 5, verse 21, prove all things. So just because you heard it here, just because you might go online and check it out yourself, don't take it for gospel. Do your own research. But one of the things that we read about the Quakers and how that religion developed is in the 1600s, they felt that Christianity had become corrupted, to a certain degree corrupted. And we know that the Reformation in England, that developed because a certain group of Christians felt that Christianity had become corrupted. And we know that as early as the 4th century AD, in the 300s AD, there were certain Christians that felt Christianity, even though it was only 300 years old, they felt that Christianity had become corrupted and needed to be changed. So we see that over the course of time, religions change, even Christianity. Islam has changed, and that's something we don't talk about too much. But even in Islam, you have different factions, different groups of Muslims. Some believe one thing, some believe another thing. You have names such as the Sunni Muslims or the Shia Muslim. But that's one thing about religions, that over a period of time, those religions have changed. And that's one of the things that we see exemplified in Jesus Christ. You see, because Jesus Christ didn't start a new religion. Christianity was not a new religion. Christianity was the offspring of several religions. When you study Christianity, you'll see that Christianity was indeed a child of, birthed by Judaism. Jesus Christ was a Jew. His mom and daddy were Jews. And a number of the tenets, teachings of Christianity come straight out of Judaism. That's why most Christian Bibles have two parts. The first part being the Old Testament, the second part being the New Testament. And the Old Testament is everything related to the Jewish people before the birth of Jesus Christ. See, but Christianity, even though the Old Testament is related to things that happened before Jesus was born, the early Christian church saw that it was so important to include the Old Testament in this religious book, to include it in this Bible, that when the church leaders met in the early 4th century, they determined and decided that, yes, the Old Testament had to be included in the Christian Bible. So we see Christianity itself is the offshoot of various religions. I say various religions because not only is it the product of Judaism, but you'll see aspects of Mithraism in Christianity. And Mithraism, that was a Roman religion that worshiped the Roman god Mithra, whose feast day just happened to be the same day that Christians chose to celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ. That's December 25th. Not only are there aspects of Mithraism incorporated in Christianity, but there are aspects of the Babylonian religions incorporated in Christianity. So it's good, and I take the time to highlight these facts, because just as you see all those images behind me in the background, all those different symbols representing various different religions, the society is interdenominational. It doesn't matter what religion you identify with. You don't have to give up your religion. Whatever religion you identify with, you don't have to give that up to be a member of the society. Because we know that at the end of the day, no matter what name we call ourselves, we know at the end of the day, there is only one God. And that we are indeed a piece of that one God. So it's good for us to have this discussion every now and then to remind us of who we are, that we are indeed a part of that one, an actual part of that one body. It's good for us to remind ourselves of that. And that helps us to work through some of these walls, some of these barriers that divide us, these names, these titles that divide us, helps us to work through that and understand that we are indeed all part of one body. All right. Let's we do have a little bit time left. So let's go into our words of inspiration. That's coming out of the book of Exodus. We're going to start the book of Exodus, chapter 10, verse 24. Actually, we're starting in 22. And Moses stretched forth his hand toward heaven, and there was a thick darkness in all the land of Egypt 3 days. They saw not one another, neither rose any from his place for 3 days. But all the children of Israel had light in their dwellings. And now, 2 weeks ago, we read those verses and we discussed them. And what we discussed was that God has a master plan. And we discussed that all those plagues that Egypt was going through was all part of God's master plan. See, God could have at any second chosen not to harden Pharaoh's heart. At any second. Matter of fact, from the very beginning, God could have chosen to have Moses go tell Pharaoh to let my people go. And then God could have inspired Pharaoh to let the Hebrew people go. God could have done that, but God didn't. And as we discussed, and as I said, my opinion, it's my own opinion, that God telling Moses to go mess with Pharaoh and then hardening Pharaoh's heart and then whipping all these plagues, diseases, and pestilence, and all this stuff on the Egyptians. My opinion was that was sadistic. That was cruel. That was a bad thing that God did. Why didn't God just, first of all, why didn't God just leave Pharaoh alone? Or if he didn't want to leave Pharaoh alone, why didn't God just let Pharaoh listen to Moses from the beginning without going through all that? See, because I'm using my mind. I'm using my brain. I'm thinking on this stuff. If I was in charge, if I wasn't just being mean, I wouldn't have done that. I would have let Moses go, tell Pharaoh, let my people go. Then I would have told Pharaoh to let the people go. I wouldn't have hardened his heart. And look, it gets progressively worse. The plagues get progressively worse. And the plague that we just read about was it got so dark that folks couldn't even see in front of themselves for 3 days. 3 days. So that means that everything just shuts down. Okay, 3 days. How are you going to go around when it's pitch black for 3 days? You have to have torch, something to light up so you can go see where you're walking. Remember, they had flashlights and nothing like that. They didn't have street lights. They didn't have none of that back in them days. 3 days. God had a plan. See, nothing like this had happened before to the Egyptians. And we talked about how God had a plan that these things would occur. These extraordinary things would occur so that people would talk about it. And as we said 2 weeks ago, rather, that God's plan worked out, because here it is. Here it is more than 2,000 years later, and we're still talking about it. Still talking about it. God has a master plan. You see, and one of the things that's so encouraging, so inspirational about reading these scriptures is because the same God that was there during the time of Moses and Pharaoh, that's the same God that's here now in 2021. The same God. You see, God that we read about in the Bible, that God has not disappeared. That God has not lost its power. Still as powerful today as it was 2,000 years ago, 3,000, 4,000 years ago. Still as powerful. And guess what? Still has a master plan. Still has a master plan. Just like it might have been hard to understand God's plan 4,000 years ago when God was hardening Pharaoh's heart. It's the same way today. That God will place things in our lives that we disagree with. That God will place stumbling blocks. Understand what I'm saying? Yes, stumbling blocks in our lives. Because it's part of God's master plan. You know, sometimes we will wake up in the morning and have our day all planned out. That we're going to wake up, brush our teeth, wash our face, get dressed, go to work, go somewhere else about our business. And then things will happen. We might go to eat our breakfast and find out we don't have any milk for our cereal. We might go to get in our car and the battery is dead. The car is not starting. And even though that occurrence might be something that we see as a stumbling block, even though that occurrence might be something that we don't want to happen, it's something that happens and we know it happens because it's part of God's plan. There are things in our lives that will happen. And maybe not something as simple as I just talked about. Maybe not something as simple as our car not starting. Maybe something even more serious, like losing a loved one, like developing a deadly disease. And at the time, it might be hard for us to understand. Not only hard to understand, but hard to accept why it's happening. And reflecting back on these scriptures can help us find peace, help us remember that God is in control. And God does indeed have a master plan for all time and all creation. I shared with you earlier about what's going on with me and my family right now. If I had my way, none of us would have tested positive. It seems like it's a real heavy blow to have that many members of one family test positive right at the same time. Might be hard to accept that this is indeed all a part of God's plan. And not being able to accept that could cause a lot of grief and turmoil. So I'm thankful. I'm thankful that God reminds me that it's not in my hands. It's in God's hands. Let's see if we can maybe read one or two more scriptures before we close out tonight. Let's see. All right. Okay, we just read that scripture there as far as Moses stretching forth his hand and God exercising his authority. And Pharaoh called unto Moses and said, Go ye, serve the Lord, only let your flocks and your herds be stayed. Let your little ones also go with you. And we discussed this as far as this chess game that's being played, that finally now has gotten to the point where Pharaoh is telling Moses, well, look, if you want to go, I done had enough being hit in the head by your God. And all these flies, locusts, darkness, and all the rest of that. I'm done. You can go. All of y'all can go. Even your little ones can go. But let your flocks and your herds be stayed. See, because Pharaoh's got a plan. And Pharaoh's plan is that Pharaoh is going to let the Hebrews go, but he wants them to come back. And he figures that if he keeps their flocks and their herds, then they're going to come back because they're not going to have nothing to eat out there. But look what Moses. Moses is a step ahead of Pharaoh. Moses says, Thou must give us also sacrifices and burnt offerings that we may sacrifice unto the Lord our God. So those sacrifices and burnt offerings, what are those? Those are the flocks and the herds. Now, Pharaoh has just about had enough of being hit in the head by God with all these plagues and stuff. Now, he definitely doesn't want to do something like not let the Hebrews have the burnt offerings and sacrifices and make God mad like that. So Moses is a step ahead of Pharaoh. Thou must give us also sacrifices and burnt offerings that we may sacrifice unto the Lord our God. Our cattle also shall go with us, there shall not an hoof be left behind, but thereof must we take to serve the Lord our God. And we know not with what we must serve the Lord until we come thither. See that step ahead. Say, look, man, Pharaoh, we got to take our herds with us, because once we get out there, we're not going to know what we need for the sacrifices. We're not going to know what we need to serve our God. So we got to take all of our stuff with us. Now look at this verse 27. But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not let them go. Scripture doesn't say that Satan hardened Pharaoh's heart. It says that the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart. And that's where we're going to end tonight. We're going to end with that scripture that made it very clear to us that the Lord hardens Pharaoh's heart. The Lord placed that stumbling block in Moses' path. There may be something in your life, and sometimes in your life, as I said earlier, that the Lord will place a stumbling block in your path. It's not to punish you. It's not because he doesn't love you. It's not because he's mean or sadistic. No, it's because God has a plan. And sometimes that plan is just too great for us to understand. But I find peace. I find peace in knowing that God has a master plan. I find peace in knowing that God indeed is in control. And as I close out tonight, that's my prayer. That's my prayer, that the same peace that I found, the same peace that I find, I'm praying that God blesses you with that same peace. No matter whatever it is that God may have planned, may have in store for you in this upcoming week, may God Almighty bless you and yours with peace. Until we meet again here next week on The Message, may God bless you with peace.